So hello, it is I, Sarah Seidelman. I'm going to attempt to sound more calm when I introduce these videos because normally I sound like I'm absolutely on some kind of crack cocaine. But it's usually just because I'm so excited to speak to my guests. So today I have for you Jen Schneider. Jen, please say hello.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here.
And Jen has the most impressive CV, but I don't know that it's relevant to what we're doing today. But know that she is a professor and highly decorated and went to Claremont College, and she has a PhD in so many things. And she is born to freak. She's freaking in so many amazing directions. It's hard to keep track, but
Highly decorated. I love that. I feel like I should have like a medal or something, like my epaulettes.
I think you should. She so I got to know Jen through her blog because she wrote this blog back in 2014, and it was about, she did this experiment where she stopped shopping for 3 months, and I was really intrigued by that because I think at the time I was recognizing that I was a person who also was a shopper. And anyway, I just thought now's a timely conversation to have. And Jen, and I know that things have happened since then. We've both grown and evolved in our shopping styles and how we shop. So how did that go? Like, tell us about this. What led you to go into this 3 month adventure of not shopping for anything?
I mean, yeah, 2014. Who even knows what led to it? Except that I feel like my therapist always talks about, like, when you learn these life lessons, it's not like you learn it and then you've got it. You're just constantly going around the spiral. So I feel like I've been around this spiral many times and I continue to go around it. But I think that I've just always been a little bit afraid of my own excesses in that regard. And I mean, I should clarify, I'm not like a big high fashion label shopper or anything. I wasn't like buying Gucci or anything like that, but I was certainly spending more on clothes than I wanted to. And I also felt like there was a compulsion behind it. So that, like, I describe it as almost like entering into a dream state, right? Like I'd have a half hour after work, but before I had to pick up the kids, and I'd just like float into the outlet mall and be like, I'm going to purchase a different life in here in the next 30 minutes, and then walk out with like $250 worth of stuff, and it just felt so amazing until, the end of the month. And I'd be like, oh my God, where'd all my money go? And what am I going to do with all this stuff that I just I'm not even sure I want it?
It doesn't fulfill like that dream state, the thing that we thought it was going to bring. It didn't 100% deliver on those goods that it said it would.
Yeah, I mean, I just have to go do it again the next month, or the next week. So I knew something was off, but I tell you, it's taken me a really long time to kind of diagnose it and to figure out what really was the core issue, and then to put some practices in place around not shopping. Because the not shopping thing, 90 days is not that long compared to Inger, right? Who did it for a year, which is amazing. And I wasn't even fully able to do it the full 90 days. I had a couple of mistakes, but I just realized that, like, that was kind of just a trick to help to get me to some understanding. But it took a long time to internalize that understanding.
Yeah. And I love how you describe it. It's like, oh, I've just got an hour here, a little, like, I just need a little something. And like, for women, where do we go? I mean, that's one culturally, like, completely acceptable thing to go. And that's what we do. We all are supposed to love shopping with each other, or shopping with our mothers or our daughters, or, I mean, that's our national pastime, according to, whatever magazines.
Yeah, I mean, totally. One of the big things I've realized in the intervening years is that I have the strongest urges to shop when I'm tired. Like, there's something I learned where it was not okay to lay down and rest or take a nap or something like that, but it was okay to enter that dream state and buy stuff. And so what I realized is, like, that's the first thing I ask myself when I feel that, like, urge to vacate the premises and go shopping, is like, am I really just tired? Like, do I just need rest? Isn't that amazing? Like, how amazing would it be if we had the supports we needed and the messages we needed to just like take care of ourselves in that basic way. But there was some part of me that had internalized that at least with shopping, you're doing something, you know?
Yeah. And it makes me think about like over anything, like we were talking before we got on, like, drugs and alcohol and, crack cocaine and gambling and sex addiction. Like none of those are things acceptable, but there's still two that are shopping and eating. And
Yeah.
like, I notice when I tend to like, eat something that I don't want to be eating, it's when I'm exhausted and all my willpower has been depleted by a day that's been tiring. And so that makes sense for shopping as well. So how has your shopping shifted? I guess that's my next question. We're participating together in the Authentic Fashion February thing. And one thing that I learned in the past 2 years from my dear friend Paula is that thrifting is like the greatest. If you want to get your thrift on, you want to get your shopping on and have some fun and also bring some more creativity into the game. That has been something so fun. And I know that you're a thrifter and you're a Poshmark person, and like, talk about that like trajectory and what have you learned from that?
Yeah, thrifting has been so liberating for me. Oh my gosh, I have like so many thoughts about it, but let me just say this. I lost both my parents in the last 2 years. They both passed away. And this like accumulation impulse is definitely like genetic or something, epigenetic, like it's passed down through the generations for my family. And clearing out my mom's house multiple times, like downsizing her as she needed increasing levels of care, or clearing out my oldest daughter's room when she went to college and just realizing like how many gifts we gave her or whatever that she just like never used was such an epiphany for me. And I've really struggled to like let go of a lot of the stuff I've attached to it. But when I started thrifting, it allowed me to release so much, because I tell you what, you go into thrift stores, at least in my area in Boise, and you see so many treasures, like things that were clearly people's prized possessions, whether it's clothes or housewares or antiques or whatever, for dollars. And that allowed me to just release so much of my mom's stuff and my kids' stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it also allowed me to release some of the weird compulsions I had with buying new. Like, I think when I was buying new online or in person, I'd be like, this is the perfect thing. This is going to be the last sweater I ever need to buy. I made it. We're good. I'm free from shopping now. Of course, that was just like a big lie, right?
Right.
But if you go into a thrift store and you're like, you know what, I'm going to try this, and it's $2.50 or even $8, whatever, you can take it home. And if it doesn't feel great, or if you gain your yearly 10 pounds and lose it again, like I often do, then you just donate it again. You like, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think it was just I needed some freedom from the attachment, and seeing the churn that happens in thrift stores was just very liberating to me. Like, I don't need to contribute to putting new stuff into thrift stores. And like, man, there's a lot of abundance out there,
There's
that I
a
can take advantage
bounty.
of. There's bounty. Yeah.
There is a bounty. And golly, you put it so well. It's like, I'm convinced this is the last sweater coat I'll ever own. And then you're just like,
Yes.
well, I've worn that 3 times and I'm kind of sick of it. I mean, some of us who are creative like to have playthings, and I was thinking a lot about like dopamine. I mean, isn't that when we're drained, we're exhausted? And those of us I was diagnosed ADHD, and I don't know if you've been diagnosed. No, maybe not.
No,
But
my kids have, though, for sure.
okay, yeah, we're hunting for that ka-ching, that dopamine hit, and shopping often hits that. But thrifting totally hits that, and it's just at a dramatically different price point, and it hits that desire for novelty, because sometimes that's what we're looking for, something new, something fresh, something whatever. And you can experiment, and it doesn't have to be this big guilty serious thing. It can be much lighter than that.
That's so true. And it also, for me, I think I've talked with you about this, Sarah, but it helped me interrupt what I call the binge purge cycle for shopping, which is where like I would binge on a bunch of new things, right? Like in one of my dream induced states. And then 6 months later or whatever, I'd be like, I need to do a closet clear out. And I would be like, this isn't good. This isn't good. This isn't me, whatever the story was. And then it was really the cycle that I was attached to. And so thrifting allowed me to slow down that cycle and really interrupt that cycle, because part of the emotional drama that I was in was the guilt over purging, which isn't that funny? I realized I was like attached to the emotional drama of the guilt. Like, how dare I spend all of this? I'm getting rid of it. It's like a way to clear it out. But then I'd be like, oh, scarcity. And I'd, bring more stuff in. And it was all of it that I somehow was, feeding something in me. And the thrifting just allowed like an interruption of that. And the churn, like I said, is just way less.
So beautifully said. That's exactly what I've done. It's like, oh my gosh, I love to purge. And then I would love to just like, I'm getting a whole new wardrobe because yes, I've gained 10 pounds or whatever. I'm a new kind of person who only wears pantaloons from the Victorian era or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. Or like for me, I'm a serious professor. I'm not somebody who's interested in material goods. I'm going to be a minimalist. And then I'd be like, actually, I'm a bohemian inside and I'm a maximalist, like just all the stuff.
Yeah, I did determine that I am not a minimalist. That was a brief moment in time where I considered applying for that club, but then
too hard.
Yeah, years ago when I don't think Mark really had anything to do with it, but I filled a house that was like 6,000 square feet with stuff handily through thrifting, but mostly I think full price purchases because I was a busy woman. I didn't have time to thrift anything at the time. And I remember when we were like selling half of our possessions as we downsized to get away from that life, that we realized, like the Buddha, this is not where it's at, being in the palace. And I remember just people were like, isn't this sad to see all your things go? And I was like, no, it's like sweet relief. And I think from that whole purge of like 3,500 square feet of stuff, there was like 2 rolls of like, ribbon that I missed. So I repurchased those, But when I got to that next house, and I mean, this is sort of shopping related. When I got to that next house, I tried to kind of recreate in a new, fresh way the opulence that we had at the old house.
Right.
That went on for about 6 months, kind of this same idea that you're talking about. It's like this cycle. And I actually was so horrified, but a year after I moved there and had kind of done some things, like had some custom silk curtains made, Jen Schneider. I mean, talk about guilt. They were gorgeous. Yeah. They were beautiful, but suddenly I couldn't breathe in there anymore. It was like, so I had to release those, and I'm sure I did not get any penny on the dollar that and just let it go. And I've learned, I guess, one of the ways that I cycled or learned how to accept that binge purge cycle. And I think like you, I've been able to slow it down with thrifting, which is interesting. But I remember learning like everything that I would bring to Goodwill, I would just on the way to the store, I would be like, thank you so much. All you possessions, like, I so appreciate you. You have helped me so much. And I just release you. And I hope your beautiful new owners find you, because I knew like from all my spiritual work that every object is divine and wants to be used, wants to be appreciated. And so I think that's why I felt guilt too, because you're suddenly in a relationship with all this stuff that you've brought home. It kind of owns you, so you own it, and it gets tricky.
Yeah, that's what marketers tell you. They'd say if they can get you in the store and if they can get you to touch an object, you're hooked, like you're in relationship with it, right? And maybe this is just listening to you speak. When we downsized my mom and my stepdad the first time, we only had 3 weeks to do it, 6,000 square foot house. My brother and I were literally running out of the house and taking truckloads to the thrift store or in the dumpster. And this is like, my parents had been antique collectors, just like objects were love to them, right? And that was certainly passed down to me. I feel an intense connection to objects, and I love beautiful objects and objects with a story. That was like emotionally and physically sickening to us to have to do that, because our parents had instilled in us that these things have value. But when we had like yard sales, or we took things to the thrift store and again saw something that my mom would be like, that was $250 sold for $2. And I'd go back to the thrift store 6 months later and I'd see my mom's things still there. That was like such an awakening to me. It was like, oh, this is a weird kind of magic spell that my family was living under.
Mm.
It was a lie in a lot of ways, a destructive one. And I'm so glad to be free of it. And so when I feel like my house is getting too cluttered or like, oh, this is a pain in the butt to clean, it's so possible now for me to give things away or to clear things out. I'm not a minimalist, but I do really like space in my house. And that's something that my mom never would have done. But I think there was just something about that, like breaking the spell that we have about objects and what they might mean for us or to us. At the end of the day, they both are meaning makers. They're ways we communicate who we are and how we feel. And they're also just stuff, right? And so figuring that out has been really significant for me.
And being mindful of that for our kids, that we're not, yeah, I mean, I guess it's sort of like, it reminds me of grief, like
Yeah.
Martin Prechtel, this shaman from, well, originally from the US, when moved to Guatemala, that's where he trained, but he talks about how if we don't feel our grief, we're going to take that bag and add it to the bag of grief that our children are going to have and our grandchildren, and they're going to all have to feel it. And if they don't feel it, that's what makes war. That's what makes terrible things happen. And I think the possession stuff, there's so much pain around that. If we think, like, if we're hoping that our children will want our grandfather clock or whatever, like if they do, wonderful. But like, if they don't, that's our responsibility to just take care of it, or have a plan for them, to downscale. My dad, a few years ago, he and my mom moved into a much smaller house, and that involved a lot of decluttering. But then he decided to declutter his office. And I remember he invited me over because he wanted to kind of figure out how to arrange the objects. And he basically was like, I'm down to these 6 things that matter to me. Like, one was they're just like a couple photographs, some statues, a book, and I remember just thinking, that is powerful. Like, just to claim this, it was basically something you could put in a cardboard, like a small carried box, no more than that. And it reminded me of like why, like monks and nuns. I've been at because of Thich Nhat Hanh's funeral, I've been watching the beautiful documentary, and I turned to my husband and I'm like, no offense to you, honey, but I'm ready to become a Buddhist nun and like get my head shaved and like bring me into this place where, they've let all that go, because I think there's such a power to like getting down to just what matters and just only what we need. And like you said in your blog years ago, I'm an American woman with a husband and some kids. So it's kind of, referencing the fact that it's unlikely we're going to end up living like Buddhist nuns, but it's beautiful to head that direction, I think, for me.
Yeah. The other thing I realized was talking about like, family inheritances was that overbuying or overpaying or overinvesting was a family trait for me. And I don't come from a wealthy family, but they obviously had enough disposable income to buy things, and they felt guilty about it. And so how that manifested for the women in my family was my grandmother would overbuy compulsively, and then she would say to my mom, I'm keeping this for you. This is going to be yours. And it was so clearly stuff that my mom did not want, but she was not allowed to sell it or give it away. So she had to store it. And then all of that came to me over the years, like with the same, like, this is where I put my treasures. This is where I put my value. This is your inheritance. And none of it held its value. So there was no sort of monetary, recouping that could happen. I mean, most kids today don't want antiques or can't afford them, right?
Right.
And so what I realized is like, if I try to hold on to things for my girls or foist things off on them, like, oh, I bought 6 pairs of jeans, I'm going to give them to, so I don't have to feel so guilty. I'm just continuing that process. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't a few things that I'm going to keep for them to have, like family jewelry or whatever, but I really just want to interrupt those patterns for my kids and for me.
I remember when my mom was getting close, she died last year. And we were talking about things, and there was, because my mom was pretty attached to some things, and there'd been some stories of things she had given me that I had then given away that she felt hurt about. And so we talked about that. But I just expressed to her mom, like, there's nothing you can give me. Everything you give me, like, it's in my heart. Like, it's not something that I can hold in my hand. And I mean, I do have one small thing, like a little ring that I wear that was hers. And that does mean something to me. Probably the thing that means the most to me that she gave me was she knitted me two things: a hat that I wear that who knows how long it will last, but every once in a while I'll misplace that thing and I get pretty upset, even though it's just a hat, and but it means something because she knit it with her own hands. And then she also knit me a rainbow snake, but that's another story, which I also treasure. But this idea that objects somehow can pass love, the way food can pass love, or, and I just think, yeah, I want to interrupt that cycle myself.
Yeah, pass love and also absolve us of guilt. And I think a lot of us who struggle with clearing out our stuff or giving things away, maybe we're attached to like getting the worth out of it, or, what do you call it? Trying to flush our guilt out, right? Like, so we're holding onto it as this kind of penance. And I just think those are the cycles to interrogate, and also to be kind to ourselves. Like, yeah, I've acted with greed. Like a lot of that came from a place of greed. And I feel like sort of tender towards that person who was like, I'm so tired. My kids are little. I don't have enough help. Work is hard. I thought that was going to be the path, right?
Yeah.
Now that I'm older and like not quite so stressed out all the time, I'm just like, oh, when I get that feeling, I just need to sit with it. Like you said, I just need to feel it, feel the grief, feel the stress, feel the pain, feel the sadness, and often take a nap. And then the shopping thing just goes away in like 5 minutes. But I'm 46. It took me 46 years, 30 years of shopping really to figure that out.
Get where you are. And let's not forget to talk about, there are some moments like back in our history, I don't know if you've had one of these, where a certain garment has been a healing magical garment.
Totally. Yeah.
So like when I was probably 12, 13 years ago, I was miserable at work, just desperate. And this catalog landed at my house. I was like, never saw the sun. All I did was like sleep, and like I was so grumpy and grouchy, and I don't think anybody wanted to be around me. But anyway, this catalog landed at our house, our large house that we had thought was going to make us so happy, which didn't. And there was this woman cavorting around in it, and this coat that I was just like,
the coat.
Yes. Who wears this coat? It was like shot with metallic threads, and it was this crazy tribal patterns. And I was like, ugh. And I was like, well, I've got the money. I could buy this coat. It was some outlandish amount of money, like $275, like, which I had never spent any such amount. But I ordered that, and I had a shopping accident of massive proportion on that catalog. But when that coat came, it really did change my life, because what I realized is I wanted a different life, and it represented this creativity and this freedom, and what this person in the catalog, who was an artist, I later learned had, or seemed to have. I've noticed now she drinks a lot of Chardonnay, and I don't know, on TV anyway. So I don't know. I don't know if she has it. I hope she does. It's really none of my business. Anyway, sidebar conversation. But that coat really helped me, sort of triggered a change and a transformation and metamorphosis. How about you? Like, what garments have helped you in your transformation over life?
That's a really good question. It's so funny just because I've gone through different professional stages lately, and like I've had to turn over my wardrobe a few times in the last 4 or 5 years, just like when I couldn't be the funky professor anymore. Now I'm in the dean's office, and like I'm funky today, so I'm representing my bohemian self, but like have a lot of suits and things like that. But I remember when I first started teaching, I was, I don't know, 25 or something, teaching in Southern California. And I had just a jean jacket that I wore. And I'd put that on and I was like, I'm the cool professor.
You ride it on a Harley or something too.
Oh, please. No, I am not that cool. But yeah, things like that are really important. And that is why, Sarah, I don't have rules around shopping anymore. Like I don't do a stop shop, or I don't say I can never buy anything new again. I just am really, because that binge purge thing is so intense for me, I really just try to like hang out in more of an equanimous middle. And if there is a $275 coat that's like, I'm going to wear the shit out of for the next few years and feels amazing to me, I will buy it if I have the money, right? That's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
But then I probably, my sort of going to the mall and like spending hours there and spending hundreds of dollars on stuff that's just like random, dopamine hits. I just don't do that anymore. So
Yeah, what a beautiful, yeah, I'm the same. I just bought another coat that was probably 10 years after that first coat. And whenever I wear that, it's very, like tons of people come up to me. It draws a lot of attention, which if I'm not in the mood for that, because it's such an astonishing coat. So people are like, where did you get that? You look so amazing. And then I kind of feel like, don't I look nice the rest of the time? I mean, it gives me all kinds of different interesting reactions, but somebody said like, certain pieces of clothing are like, what do we call them in shamanic worlds? Like people call them like medicine coats or cloaks, or,
like
they have these
totems.
magical powers, and so clothes, I think, can be our shield to the world. Well, this has been so much fun. I could talk to you for hours about this topic. I think, and then you're just so wise, the way you kind of synthesize the information and explain it. I relate so much to everything that you said. So I just thank you so much for coming on. And I know that somebody's going to listen to this and feel, learn something about themselves.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for asking me and for running Authentic Fashion February. It's just like one of my favorite things in the world. I'm so glad to be in it. So.
It is so fun. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to explain how fun it is until you do it.
That's right. Thank you, lady.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later.